Today I'd like to discuss something that these two watches have in common, and it's not the GMT hand. For an introduction, on the left is an Omega Flightmaster, which dates back to the late 60s, early 70s. You can clearly see the Flightmaster on the dial. Here you have a Seiko Kinetic Flightmaster, which dates back to the late 90s. I was wondering how it could be that both watches from different brands, true for different time periods, could have the same presumably trademarked name on it. So that got me thinking, and I did some research, and I'd like to present my findings. First piece of evidence. But before that, let me just throw in the caveat. I'm not a lawyer, I don't have intellectual property experience, and I did my research just as an amateur hobbyist. The first evidence I found for the trademark of Flightmaster came from the Japanese trademark database, and it was filed in 1995 by Seiko. And 95 really makes a lot of sense because a few years later, they released the Seiko Kinetic Flightmaster. Now, based on my limited knowledge of intellectual property, if this was allowed to pass, that means Omega never registered a trademark in Japan, or it did, but it lapsed. So again, keep 1995 in mind. Omega decided to trademark Omega Flightmaster a little bit more than a decade later in 2006. This was an international trademark filing. They had a lot of success, except in two key markets. Japan refused it, and the US refused it. I wonder why. With Japan, it's not terribly difficult. They determined that Seiko owned the trademark there, so they couldn't get it. With the US, it's a little bit more complicated and beyond the scope of this video, so we'll just leave it as they were never able to set up a Omega Flightmaster trademark in the US. This leads us to the end. My theory is that they had tried to register Omega Flightmaster as an international trademark because they were doing a reissue of the Flightmaster. And if you look, and the watch obviously ended up being released as the Spacemaster Z33, but they even have Flightmaster listed in the blurb, and it really should be a lowercase f, just like the dial, but that's neither here nor there. So since they couldn't claim the international trademark, they had to change it to Spacemaster Z33. And it seems like the most logical conclusion, because I don't think they would put Flightmaster in there in the first place if this was just going to be a descendant of the X33. Well, that's the end of my detective work. I hope perhaps someone found this interesting, but if you didn't, I could totally understand, as this is a little bit dry. But I had fun researching it, and as usual, thanks for watching.